I played 4 years of high school hockey out of the Lansing area for a co-op called DeWitt St. John's. That's obviously changed over the years, and Lansing hockey especially, a lot of different co-ops and teams have added and changed and dropped, and things have changed there a little bit. So the landscape I came up in is much different now than what it is currently. But after playing 4 years, I started coaching for that same co-op. I moved to the Detroit area. I started coaching over here. I was with Livonia Stevenson and Dave Mitchell for 4 years. And then most recently just finished up 3 years with Saline High School, coaching with Kyle Zagata. So high school hockey has always been a big part of my life for as long as I can remember, obviously. So super passionate about it. It's always been something near and dear to me. And even when I wasn't coaching, I was always kind of looking for avenues and ways that I could impact the game, have a positive impact on kids in the game, coaches in the game, kind of how I could still have an impact on the landscape even when I wasn't coaching. And so I think it was 2018, 2019 is kind of when I started doing a lot of the Petey's Picks stuff, which was primarily through the High School Hockey Hub. And, I was doing game previews. I was doing like fantasy teams of the week and picking, 3 forwards, 2D, and a goalie, and just kind of having fun with it. I did probably most notably was the top 100 players to know in high school hockey that I did at the beginning of each season, where we kind of previewed the season and then kind of highlighted some of the big names to know in high school hockey. And that was something that really took fire and took on a life of its own, really, with, coaches, players, everybody reaching out. Hey, you got to know about this guy. Hey, you forgot about that guy. Hey, you're too low on this guy. So I really did it to kind of create that buzz, create that awareness of players in the game. And whether I was right or wrong didn't really matter. It just kind of got everybody talking about high school hockey. So I did that for 2 years. And then, like I mentioned, I got back into coaching with Saline in 2020, right after the pandemic, or right as the pandemic was hitting and everything. And it just didn't feel right. It was kind of hard for me to wear 2 hats at one time, trying to coach and then also trying to provide media coverage of high school hockey. So I did have to kind of step back away from Petey's Picks and doing a lot of the media coverage that I was doing and really focus on our team and coaching. And so, yeah, that was that. Obviously very proud of what we accomplished at Saline in those 3 years, in the direction Kyle Zagata has them heading in. It was fantastic to be a part of that turnaround and kind of bringing them back to where they are now. Super excited about what the future holds for them as well. But it's just not, coaching right now just isn't really in the cards for me personally. A lot of things going on with the family and at home, and we got 2 little ones. I'm very, I don't know if you guys can hear it or not, but very congested at the moment. I'm sick. And the wife was like, "You're really going to do a podcast all sick like this?" I was like, I got to power through. I got to find a way. And I told you guys I was going to do this, and I'm not going to skimp out on you or make excuses just because I got a head cold or something. So, one of the kids, daycare, I'm sure we brought something home, as all you parents out there can sympathize with me for a little bit. So it's the first, but I'm sure won't be the last this hockey season where we're a little nasally, a little sniffly, having to power through a podcast for you guys here. My plan is to do this weekly. I'm shooting for Mondays, but we'll see how that goes, especially as the season trudges on here. So definitely bummed to be stepping away from coaching. I mentioned that in the preview video I put out. Definitely bummed to not be a part of Saline moving forward, but Kyle's a very good friend, and definitely excited to see what they can do moving forward, and we'll have a close eye on them for sure. So coaching is a way for me, like I said, to kind of have an impact on the next generation and kind of help them develop and grow and learn the game and enjoy it the same way I did. By stepping away and now kind of stepping into that media role, I feel like I can still kind of continue to have that impact in some capacity anyways. So definitely excited to see what we can do this year. and getting people involved, and with the podcast, potential for interviews, potential for guest pickers, all sorts of stuff. So excited about what we can do here in the next couple months. So what's different? Well, first of all, the website, peteyspicks.com. If you haven't seen it yet, be sure to check it out. That is completely 100% me. My professional life, I do a lot in digital media and on the digital side of things. So that website is completely 100% by me, for me. So everything you see there, with the exception of a couple photos, I've gotten to know a couple professional photographers that are a lot better than me. So everything you see there will all be straight from me. There's no in between. There's no barrier. There's no, if you send an email, if you send a text or whatever it is, it's all through me. So be sure to check out that website, peteyspicks.com. The other thing too, obviously this podcast, we've never done the podcast before. This is season 1, episode 1. And I got high hopes, high expectations for this as well. My goal with everything I've done on the media side of things has always been to cover youth hockey, cover the kids the way the pros get covered. So obviously you see Spittin' Chicklets, you see, all these podcasts about hockey and football and fantasy football and the NBA and all that stuff. I want to take that same level of attention and detail and put out a product similar for youth hockey and what we do here. So I'm excited about that, excited about what we can do content-wise. I mentioned the picks. I want to get you, the audience, involved. I'm still working out some of the details on that as far as the website goes, but I'll have my weekly picks, 4 or 5 games of the week that I'm paying attention to and making my picks and predictions. I really want to find a way to open that up to you guys so that you can make picks and predictions as well. So stay tuned for that and keep an eye out for that as well. Bracketology, I mentioned the fantasy teams that I was doing before, just fun, interesting, energetic ways to provide that coverage, to get players' names out there, to get programs out there that maybe might not get covered as much as before. So that's really what I'm looking to do here. Additionally, also looking to dip my toes into the AAA world a little bit. Again, professionally, I've gotten to know that landscape a lot better in the last couple of years. Not just locally, but globally as well. I've been a part of major global events like the World Selects Invitational, the Hockey Hall of Fame, Future Legends, seeing the Brick, Pee Wee Quebec, those types of really iconic events in the AAA space. I think it's important to highlight the players and kids from the state of Michigan that are doing big things in those avenues as well. So like I said, really want to put a focus on the AAA side of things as well and really promote youth hockey in the state of Michigan and how great our product really is and can be. So keep a lookout for that as well. As far as today goes, I did want to spend a good chunk talking about MHA tryouts. I was at tryouts on Saturday for a good bit and got to watch, to me, like this week is kind of the start of the high school hockey season in a way, with MHA tryouts, MDHL tryouts coming up this weekend as well. I know the winter season doesn't start till November 1st, but with the fall seasons, with what's going on right now with the MHA and MDHL and all that, if you're a top-level high school player in Michigan, like, your season is starting right now because of tryouts and because of the MDHL League, the Top 80 Showcase. These things are kind of where you start to put yourself on the map. So in my mind, like I said, I think that high school season really starts right now. So I was at tryouts. Rick Gadwa, had some great conversations with him leading up to it. We talked a bunch at the event as well. He was funny. He's like, yeah, tryouts, come to the showcase. Come to the showcase. And I'm like, Rick, I'm coming to the showcase. But I'm like, I still want to come to tryouts and just experience, see what it's all about. I think there's a ton of value in still watching the tryouts and watching kids who may or may not make the showcase, may or may not make the MDHL league play, because there's a lot of good players that don't make the cut, and so I think it's important to see what all is out there, who does make it, but who doesn't make it. I think there's a lot of value, and I reference back to probably 2 or 3 different instances where I was at tryouts, and Big Rapids was one that stood out in my mind from 4 or 5 years ago, where they had 3 or 4 kids that I thought were like really good, solid players, and didn't happen to make the cut. But Big Rapids still went on to have a good season that year, and those kids had a lot to do with it. Clarkston, I could say the same thing. Back in 2019, maybe it was. Where they sent 4 or 5 kids to the MDHL, and they all and none of them made it, and could have been justified in not making it. I think when that stuff happens, it just speaks to the depth of talent out there in the high school circles. And I'm not saying any those 4 or 5 should have made it over anyone else. I'm just saying like it speaks when those kids stand out to me. They may not stand out to someone else, or vice versa. So, another player stands out to them that didn't stand out to me. So, even player evaluations and things like that are very, what's the word I'm thinking of? Subjective, maybe, where each evaluator is obviously going to be a little bit different. So I do think there's a ton of value even for the kids who don't end up making the league or the showcase in the MHA instances, where there's a ton of value there, even in going through the tryout, going through the evaluation process, and I call it building your resume. If you're a young kid, if you're a freshman, sophomore, and you go and you get cut this year, like I don't want to see you 12 months from now go and say, I'm not going to go. They cut me last year. Like, screw those guys. Like, no, sometimes that's kind of the process. Like you go, you show up, you may show well and just not be well enough, but well enough that someone like me is going to remember you, right? Oh yeah, I remember that name. Oh yeah, Clarkston. They've got a really up and coming program, and yeah, like I remember that guy. So then when they see you again 6 months from now at Team Michigan tryouts, or 12 months from now at MDHL tryouts again, like it's about building that resume, and you can't just ride or die on whether you make it or get cut. Like use it as a stepping stone, use it as a building block, and kind of a feather in your cap there. So that's why I like going to the tryouts, even though obviously from the top prospects and things like that I kind of focus on. Yeah, the top 80 is what you want to see, but like I said, the tryout portion of everything too, I think there's a ton of value in seeing and taking that in. So a couple of big takeaways I got from the weekend anyways, or from the MHA tryouts. Clarkston, I mentioned them earlier, like they're not a flash in the pan. I think they're here, and I think they're here to stay. We've seen programs like that in the past where they get a good class together, right? In the freshman, sophomore, and then junior, senior, they add a couple more, and you get a core group of kids who have played together for a long time, even going back to their youth days, and then it kind of culminates with a senior season. And then once those seniors graduate, the program might kind of fall off a little bit, or maybe there's a coaching change, and so you see some of these, for lack of a better phrase, like a flash in the pan in high school hockey, where they have a really good run or a really good group that keeps that program solid for 2 or 3 or 4 years. I don't think that's Clarkston. I think Clarkston is the real deal, and they're gonna be here for a while. I mentioned them a couple years back, 4 or 5 kids at the MDHL tryout. And, I think I even saw the kid's name. I think it was Earring. If I can find my notes. Yeah, Brady Earring, who probably a senior this year, I'm thinking. I remember seeing him I'm pretty sure, MDHL tryouts, 2-3 years ago, and watching him and thinking, this kid's really solid. He's really good. And unless my memory is off, which it very well can be, I'm pretty sure the year I saw him and the year he stood out to me, he didn't make the league. And so fast forward now, Clarkston has become a really good program, not just on the east side, but across the state. So, and I think I look at them, I look at Byron Center, I look at some of those programs that have kind of taken that next step in the last couple of years to take themselves from, oh wow, like they're doing nice things, to now being a potential, state contender. Clarkston, to me, that year, 4 or 5 kids, none of those kids make the league, but they all showed well. They continued to develop. Coach continues to send them to the MDHL and the MHA tryouts and Team Michigan tryouts, I think. And so you just see that resume building, that growth, that it's a process. We talk about the process so much in hockey from a player development standpoint. That same is true about building a program. And the problem, I think, for some high school programs is there's just not enough longevity. You get a coach who's there for 3, 4, 5 years, and then it's another coach for 3, 4, 5 years. Like, you just don't kind of get that consistency. I think Clarkston is on a really great trajectory to do some, they've already accomplished some really great things just in the last year or 2 years. And I think they're on a trajectory to really continue that climb, especially based on, some of the kids I saw this weekend that showed really well and looked good. And I'm sure I don't know who's in or who's out at tryouts. I'm just there, solo, but I'd be shocked if there weren't a couple Clarkston kids in that top 80 and representing that program this fall. So super excited about Clarkston and kind of where they're heading. And to give you another example too, real good buddy of mine, Travis DeLong, assistant coach at Cap City in Lansing. And, Clarkston reminds me a lot of where Cap City was 2, 3, 4, 6 years ago. I remember having conversations with Trav about wanting to get just one kid into the MDHL, and it was such a process for them, and trying to convince Lansing kids to even be a part of this, if they even wanted to be in the league. And I remember very distinctly being on the phone with Trav, just trying to convince this one kid to try out and ultimately make the league. And it was like pulling teeth. We couldn't convince him. He didn't go. And Trav and the program in general, they could have very easily gotten discouraged and said, nah, screw it. We'll give up the fight. We're not pushing it. The next year they send 2 or 3 kids and none of them make it. And then the next year they send 4 or 5 kids and one of them made it. As a coach, I think it's very easy to get frustrated with that process as you've lived it for 3, 4 years. No, I'm not going to send my kids to the MDHL. They're not going to get a fair shake, because, I sent 3 and they all got cut. Persistence, I think, is key in a lot of those instances where continue to send those kids and then it's 1 kid gets through and then 2 kids get through and then 4 kids get through. Well, that process may take 3 or 4 years of trial and error, pushing kids to the MDHL, pushing kids to the MHA. But if you can power through and stick with that process, I think you see the benefits of it. You look at Cap City now, and they've won a fistful of regional championships since then. They've made a push at quarterfinals and made some deep playoff runs. So you see the fruits of their labor there with stuff like the MDHL and Team Michigan tryouts, and now where Cap City is. And I think Clarkston, like I said, is on that very similar trajectory where they were pushing kids and getting denied, and pushing kids and getting 1 through, and pushing kids and getting 2 through, and knocking on the door long enough that they're finally breaking through here, and I think heading in a really, really good direction. So I did want to mention 3 kids, and I wasn't going to spend a ton of time on players that stood out to me because, like I said, top 80 showcase. I think that's more the environment for kind of focusing on some of the top players and top prospects. MDHL league play and their showcase, I think, is another one where I'll really get more into the nitty-gritty about players that stood out, what I liked about their game, and kind of their development process. I did want to mention a couple, though, just because to me it very much felt like a tryout. A lot of, and coaches and evaluators will know what I mean by that. Like, it wasn't the prettiest hockey. It was quite sloppy at times, but that's what it is when you get kids who've never played together and you throw them on the ice and say, hey, have a scrimmage. It is going to be sloppy and ugly and definitely a challenge for evaluators, but there were a couple that I thought stood out, head and shoulders, and really made themselves very noticeable in a really good way. If I could find my notes here real quick. Carson Cajigal, I think I'm saying that right, out of Stony Creek. He was one who had a really good, first couple strides and was explosive at times with his speed. And I think when you do those little things right, in skating, if you can skate, you're really going to stand out in tryouts like this. And I thought he was one that stood out. I wrote down pucks with a purpose, and I just loved that. He was constantly putting pucks, not necessarily on the tape to someone, but putting them in space where they can skate into it. He was just constantly moving pucks with a purpose and good intent behind a lot of the plays he was making. And when you do some of that stuff, like I said, as an evaluator, that stands out where you're like, oh, wow, you're thinking the game in a very cerebral way, or you're just a good understanding of the game where, you might be fumbling over a puck. You might not have your best shift, but if I'm seeing those types of plays, I know the intangibles are there. So, a lot of Stony Creek kids there too. They all there was a couple that looked really solid to me. Cajigal, like I said, being one of them. So super, super excited about that. Owen Croston was another one. Clarkston kid, like I mentioned. He was one who, pace-wise, just kind of seemed like he was on another level. And not that, I know there's other kids there who can play at the pace that Croston was. It's just Croston was the only one kind of bringing it or forcing the issue. And so that right off the jump kind of stood out to you in the stands as you were watching. So really good with the puck too, crafty, a couple inside outside moves to make himself a threat getting to the net. I thought his play really stood out too. And again, not that these guys were the best there, it's just they were doing things that really jumped out and grabbed my attention. There was one more here I just can't find my notes on them. Here we go. Christian Haji. Again, sorry if I'm butchering any of these names. Just shoot me a DM and say, hey, idiot, this is how you say it. I really, and I want to get it right too. So if I'm not saying things right, obviously, absolutely call me out and let me know. But Christian Haji, Brother Rice kid, it was so funny. So I was up there and I'm writing it down. I said, very active, always around the puck. And no sooner did I pick up my pen from the paper, he scored a goal. So it was super funny. But again, if you're that busy, that engaged, constantly around the play, good things are going to ultimately happen for you. And they did this weekend for Haji. And again, were there guys there that were better than these three? Yeah, probably. Were there guys that they just did things that were very, very noticeable to me in the stands. So maybe they make the top 80, maybe they don't. That's the other thing too, is I'm not really involved in the evaluation process. So, I may be highlighting kids that don't end up making it. I don't mean to, laugh or besmirch that. I'm just saying, in reality, what stands out to me might not stand out to them too. So, yeah, those were three that stood out to me a bunch. Obviously there's a bunch more and I'm sure we will get into a lot of them as the season progresses too, but the weekend it was a good kind of benchmark or start to this process to start to get a feel for kids and where they're at, what programs they're with, what that program could potentially look like this season too. So I do have my biggest bone to pick with players coming out of tryouts though, and it's all tryouts. It's not MHA. It's not just the MDHL. It's not, junior camps or what. It's literally just a tryout problem. Maybe it's not a problem to other people. I don't really like it that much. Is when teammates are on the same line together or they're D pairings together, it's an uncomfortable situation or an uncomfortable environment to be in. I get it. So your natural instinct is probably to play with people you're comfortable with. Hey, this is my buddy. I've been playing with him for 2-3 years. We're going to have good chemistry. We're going to look good in a tryout environment. So it's easy to kind of cling to those teammates in those situations. But from an evaluation standpoint, I don't really care for it. Like, if I see, I'm going to use Flint Powers as an example just because there's a couple of kids on the sheet I'm looking at. But if I see a Flint Powers kid and he's standing out, he's a hard F1, he's heavy on, he's hard on pucks, he's playing physical, executing net drives. If he's doing some of those things on his own and he's playing with a Heartland and a Lake Orion kid, that's going to stand out to me. If I see 3 Flint Powers kids go in and execute a line rush, I'm just going to be like, it's Flint Powers. They're well coached. They're executing the system that they've been taught for 2 or 3 years. So when I see 3 Flint Powers kids execute a play, it just doesn't resonate with me personally because I'm equating it to the program and not necessarily the kids. When I see a Flint Powers kid make a good individual play on his own with 2 random line mates, it resonates with me more. I say, that's a really talented kid. When I'm looking at a line of 3 CC kids or 3 Heartland kids, and they're moving the puck well and they're making hockey plays and they're doing whatever, I find myself then trying to rank those 3 and going, okay, well, who's the best of those 3? And maybe all 3 are good enough to make it. Maybe all 3 aren't good enough to make it, but they look good enough because they're playing within that system they're comfortable with. I don't know if that's making complete sense, but like in my mind as I'm watching it, that's what I'm thinking. So, I know it's easy, it's comfortable to play with kids that but when you're in those uncomfortable situations, steer into it. Try to play with new guys. Try to make plays with guys you're not familiar with because you make the top 80, if you make the MDHL, if you make a junior team, you're going to be playing with guys that are unfamiliar to you and that you're going to have to develop a chemistry with. So I just think it's a good practice to get in the rhythm of because, I'll equate it to like playing cards. If all 3 of you sit down at the same table, the odds of all 3 of you winning is very, very minuscule. If all 3 of you sit down at 3 different tables and you all play well, the odds of all 3 of you continuing to win or win or make it, in this case, make the tryout, I think is way higher than all 3 of you playing together. That's just my 2 cents. Some other evaluators may feel the same, some may feel different, but I see it all too much at really any tryout you walk into where, like I said, you get a whole line from back home and they all play together and they all look great, but then 1 or 2 of them make it and that one person now has to play with other people they're not familiar with and doesn't look as good and they kind of lose that shine, so to speak. So again, that would be my 2 cents for any kids trying out. If you're going to look good, you're going to look good regardless of, who you're playing with essentially. So I think there's way more value in playing with people you don't know. And again, that's just from an evaluator standpoint. So looking ahead here, MDHL tryouts this weekend, super excited about that. Literally an all-day affair from morning till night at KV right down the road here, so super convenient. I'll be there. It's always, one of my favorites to sit there and see, 200, 250 kids come through the door and you get a good sense of kids and top prospects from around the state. So looking forward to that. I mentioned AAA stuff. I'm still working my way through. I've gone back on Live Barn and watched a couple of the games from the USA Hockey player development camps. I watched 17s, 16s. Got to watch a couple 15 games too and get a good idea for, the AAA landscape there too. So got that on my to-do list. And then, maybe this time next week we have some MHA top 80 announcements. We'll see, but I'm keeping an eye out for that. So if you do anything after all of this, I just ask that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Everything I post is going to go to YouTube first. It'll also make its way to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all of that. But it's going to YouTube first. So if you want notifications and all that, I really strongly suggest that you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll go from there. You can get at me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook as well. Anything, if you guys have show topics, if you've got questions, I do have an email. Maybe we can start like a mailbag too. You guys can write in some questions, and we'll go from there. But excited to kind of see the direction and where we can go with this. So God dang, I don't know a good way to end this. I keep stumbling over my stuff, but all right, we'll see you at the rink soon.